Started as a joke. Or maybe as a cruel way of proving a point, that even the richest girls in Manhattan could be so desperately lonely, they'd pay someone just to sit across the table and listen. Vivian Carlyle, heiress of Carlyle Enterprises, didn't look like the type who needed company. She was dazzling in her silk dress, red lips curved like they could command kingdoms, and diamonds dangling from her ears that sparkled with every turn of her head. But that night, hidden behind the tinted glass of a penthouse suite high above Fifth Avenue, she made a phone call that reeked of quiet despair. She hired a girl. Not for sex, not for scandal, just to talk. And when Emma Hayes walked in, carrying nothing but a thrift store jacket, and the kind of unshakable warmth you couldn't buy, everything Vivian thought she controlled began to unravel. Vivian was 26 and lived in a world that revolved around headlines. Heiress in waiting. Fashion icon. The labels clung to her skin like perfume she couldn't wash off. What nobody wrote in glossy magazines was that she hadn't had a real conversation in months. Not the kind that mattered. Not the kind where she could admit she didn't sleep well at night, that champagne tasted bitter when you were alone, or that sometimes she wished she could run away to a small town and just be. Emma was the opposite. She was 23, freshly out of college, and juggling 2 jobs just to cover rent for a shoebox apartment in Brooklyn. She had never met anyone like Vivian Carlyle, never even imagined herself stepping into a penthouse suite with marble floors, and a view that made the city look like a jewelry box spilled open. When the agency offered her this strange gig-paid companionship, no strings attached, she nearly laughed. But she needed the money, and curiosity was a powerful drug. The moment their eyes met, Emma saw it. The cracks beneath Vivian's flawless surface. And Vivian, for the first time in years, felt like someone was truly seeing her. "Why me?" Emma had asked the first night, her voice light, teasing. "There must be 100 people lining up just to talk to you." Vivian smirked, swirling her wine glass like it was a shield. "Because they'd want something in return." "You don't." Emma tilted her head, smiling in that unguarded way of hers. "You don't know that yet. It was supposed to be one evening, one transaction." But Vivian called her again. And again. Within weeks, Emma was sitting across from her in dim-lit restaurants, listening as Vivian ranted about corporate board members, about how suffocating her family could be, about how she hated the taste of caviar, but had to smile through it anyway. Emma didn't offer advice. She just listened. Sometimes she made Vivian laugh so hard that her bodyguards turned their heads, startled by the sound. Somewhere in between the shared glasses of Merlot and midnight walks through Central Park, the line blurred. Vivian found herself watching the way Emma tucked her hair behind her ear, how her eyes softened when she was genuinely interested. She caught herself lingering too long, her chest tightening in a way that felt both terrifying and inevitable. Emma noticed too. It should have been impossible. A billionaire heiress and a girl from Brooklyn, worlds colliding like mismatched puzzle pieces. Yet the city, with its endless anonymity, carved out a space for them. A corner booth in a cafe where nobody recognized Vivian without her entourage. A bookstore on Bleecker Street where Emma's laughter echoed against dusty shelves. Still, beneath every fragile moment of closeness, Vivian felt the weight of her world pressing down. She couldn't just be Vivian. She was Carlyle, legacy, power, scandal waiting to happen. And Emma was the risk she couldn't afford. But the heart doesn't care about headlines. One evening, after too many glasses of wine, Vivian whispered something she hadn't planned. "Stay." Emma froze, eyes wide. "Stay where?" "Here. With me. Just don't go tonight." There it was, the crack widening, the wall collapsing. And in that charged silence, with the city lights painting their shadows on the penthouse walls, Emma realized she was falling. Not because Vivian was rich, not because she was beautiful, but because beneath the armor, she was achingly human. Yet falling for an heiress was never going to be simple. When the press caught the first glimpse of them leaving a jazz bar together, headlines exploded. Social media spun theories. Was Emma her new stylist? A secret cousin? A fling? Vivian's family board demanded answers, their legacy at stake. Vivian denied everything, her voice cold in front of cameras. But when she returned to her apartment that night, Emma was waiting, hurt, eyes shining with betrayal. "You made me feel like I mattered," Emma said softly, her voice cracking. "But out there you couldn't even say my name." Vivian had no defense. Only silence, heavy and sharp enough to cut the air between them. And just like that, the girl she had hired, the girl she hadn't meant to love, walked away. 2 weeks passed. Vivian drowned herself in board meetings and cocktail parties, pretending Emma had been nothing but a passing distraction. But every time she looked at the empty chair across her table, the ache hollowed deeper. Emma tried to move on too. She picked up extra shifts, avoided the parts of the city that reminded her of Vivian. But loneliness has a way of echoing, and the memory of Vivian's laugh lingered like perfume on borrowed clothes. And when fate pushed them back into the same room, a charity gala Emma had no business attending but catered for, the collision was inevitable. Vivian, in her designer gown, spotted her across the room carrying a tray of champagne. Their eyes met, and the world stilled. Would Vivian risk everything for a girl who had nothing? Would Emma let herself trust a woman who lived behind walls of wealth and secrets? The answer was written in the silence between them, in the way Vivian took the glass from Emma's tray but never let go of her hand. Because sometimes love doesn't ask for permission, just happens. Vivian Carlyle had always known how to hold her head high, even when the ground beneath her feet was crumbling. She could walk through a room filled with Manhattan's elite, smile with perfect precision, and convince every camera that she was untouchable. But the moment she saw Emma across that gala ballroom, balancing a tray of champagne like her life depended on it, every ounce of armor she'd built cracked wide open. Emma didn't belong here. That was the first thought that ripped through Vivian's mind. Not because she wasn't beautiful, she was radiant, her soft features glowing even under the harsh chandelier lights, because this world was cruel to people like her. To people without fortunes, without last names that opened doors. And Emma's presence, so fragile and unguarded, felt like a lamb walking into a lion's den. Vivian's hand trembled as she reached for a glass, and for the briefest moment, her fingers brushed against Emma's. Electricity. The kind that shouldn't exist, the kind that made the air heavy. Emma froze, her lips parting as if to speak, but Vivian's father's voice boomed across the room, pulling her back into the performance she'd perfected all her life. "Vivian, darling, over here." Emma lowered her gaze quickly, retreating into the crowd of servers, as though she had never been there. But Vivian couldn't breathe. Every conversation that night felt like static, every laugh she faked felt hollow, because all she could think about was the girl carrying trays when she should have been carrying dreams. Later that night, Vivian slipped out from the gala's main hall and found Emma leaning against a wall in the staff corridor, her eyes clouded with something unspoken. "You shouldn't be here," Emma whispered, not looking up. Vivian's chest tightened. "Neither should you." Emma laughed softly, bitterly. "You're right. But unlike you, I don't have a choice." The words hit harder than they should have. Vivian, for all her wealth, had never felt so powerless as she did standing in front of this girl. "Emma," she started, but her voice faltered. How could she apologize for the silence of that press conference, for pretending Emma didn't exist? "You don't get it, do you?" Emma's eyes finally met hers, burning with quiet fury. "You wanted someone to listen. I gave you that. And in return you erased me." Vivian swallowed hard. "I thought I was protecting you." Emma shook her head. "No. You were protecting yourself." And with that, she walked away, leaving Vivian stranded in a hallway that suddenly felt colder than the Arctic. Days bled into weeks, and Vivian tried everything to bury herself in work. She attended board meetings, smiled at investors, even let her parents parade her in front of potential suitors. But nothing worked. At night, in the silence of her penthouse, she found herself replaying Emma's words, over and over, like an echo she couldn't escape. Emma had been right. Vivian had erased her. Out of fear. Out of weakness. And maybe out of love. Because admitting Emma's presence to the world wasn't just about scandal. It was about vulnerability. It was about saying, "Here is the one person who sees me, the one person who matters." And Vivian had never been brave enough to risk that. Until now. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Vivian was seated at a boardroom table, her father droning on about profit margins, when her phone buzzed. A news alert. Emma Hayes, 23, saves child from car accident in Brooklyn. Vivian's heart stopped. She read the article twice, her fingers trembling. Emma had pulled a little girl out of harm's way, suffering a sprained wrist in the process. The story had gone viral, Her picture plastered everywhere, a candid shot of Emma holding the child, her hair plastered to her cheeks by the rain, eyes fierce with courage. In that moment Vivian knew. Emma wasn't just someone she had hired. She wasn't just someone who had filled the silence in her life. She was extraordinary. And Vivian couldn't keep hiding. That night, Vivian showed up at Emma's apartment. Not in a chauffeured car, not with bodyguards, but alone, soaked from the rain, trembling with a fear she hadn't felt since she was a child. Emma opened the door, her wrist wrapped in a bandage, surprise flashing across her face. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice flat, guarded. Vivian swallowed hard, fighting to find words that had never come easily to her. "I saw what you did. With the little girl." Emma's brow furrowed. "So what? You came to congratulate me? Or to make sure I don't embarrass you again?" "No," Vivian said quickly, her voice breaking. "I came because I can't do this anymore." Emma crossed her arms. "Do what?" "Pretend." Silence. The kind that made Vivian's chest ache. "I pretended you were just someone I paid to talk to. I pretended I didn't care when the press found out. I pretended I could live without you. But I can't." Emma's eyes softened just slightly, but her voice was still cautious. "Vivian." "I was a coward," Vivian admitted, her throat tight. "I thought I was protecting you, but really I was protecting myself. Because you matter. You matter more than the Carlyle name, more than the money, more than any of it." Her words hung in the air, raw and unpolished, a confession carved out of her very soul. Emma's eyes glistened. She wanted to believe her Vivian could see it. But belief was dangerous. Trust even more so. "You can't just show up here and say that," Emma whispered. "Love isn't a performance you pull out when it's convenient." Vivian stepped closer, her hand trembling as she reached for Emma's. "Then let me prove it. Let me show you, not just tonight, not just in private, but everywhere. I don't care about the headlines anymore. I don't care what my family thinks. If I lose everything else, fine. But I can't lose you." Emma's lips parted, a shaky breath escaping her. And for the first time since she walked away, hope flickered in her eyes. The next day, Manhattan woke up to chaos. Paparazzi photos flooded every gossip site, every news outlet. Vivian Carlyle walking hand in hand with Emma Hayes through Central Park. No bodyguards. No disguises. Just the two of them, fingers intertwined, laughter breaking through the rain. Carlyle Enterprises stock dipped 3 points. Editorials screamed scandal. Comment sections exploded with every opinion imaginable. But for Vivian, none of it mattered. She had Emma's hand in hers. And for the first time in her life she felt free. Of course, freedom came at a cost. Her father called her into his office, his face a storm. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he thundered. "You've jeopardized the family, the company, our reputation." Vivian didn't flinch. "No. I've saved myself." He stared at her, stunned by her defiance. This girl, she's nothing. Do you think she'll stand by you when the world turns its back?" Vivian thought of Emma's smile, of the way she had listened without judgment, of the courage she carried in her bones. She lifted her chin. "She already has." Her father's eyes narrowed, but Vivian didn't waver. For once, she wasn't the heiress he controlled. She was a woman in love, and she wasn't about to give that up. But the outside world wasn't as forgiving. Emma became a target. Strangers online dissected her life, her job history, her family background. Reporters camped outside her apartment. Whispers followed her wherever she went: gold digger, opportunist, scandal. Vivian tried to shield her, but Emma refused to hide. "If we're going to do this," she told Vivian firmly, "then I won't live in the shadows. I won't be your secret anymore." And so they faced it together, side by side at charity events, arm in arm at press conferences. Vivian's polished words and Emma's quiet strength painting a picture the world hadn't seen before. Love that didn't fit the mold but burned just as brightly. Of course, not everyone cheered. But those who mattered most, Vivian and Emma themselves, knew the truth. Love was never meant to be safe. It was meant to be real. The night after their first public appearance, Vivian and Emma returned to the penthouse. The city lights glittered below, but neither of them looked out the window. Instead, Vivian cupped Emma's face in her hands, her voice trembling. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Emma smiled softly, pressing her forehead against Vivian's. I almost did. But then I remembered, sometimes the richest people in the world are the ones who've been given the least. Vivian's throat tightened. And what did I give you? Emma's eyes shone with warmth. A reason to stay. And in that moment, the heiress and the girl she had hired, two souls from worlds apart, finally found a place that felt like home. The morning after their quiet victory, walking hand in hand through the storm of cameras, Emma woke to the sound of silence. No clinking of champagne glasses, no dull hum of traffic 20 stories below. Just silence, heavy and rare. She blinked against the soft light pouring in through the penthouse curtains. Vivian lay beside her, still asleep, her usually perfect hair a little chaotic against the pillow, her chest rising and falling with a rhythm that felt human, vulnerable. Emma smiled faintly. She had only ever seen Vivian as polished perfection, but now she looked like any other woman, her defenses gone. Beautiful, yes, but also real. The smile faltered when Emma's phone buzzed on the nightstand. She hesitated before checking it, but the notifications flooded in. Dozens of missed calls, messages from unknown numbers, news alerts, and worse, the photos. Headlines screamed across her screen. Gold digger or true love? The heiress and the waitress. Emma Hayes. The woman who stole Manhattan's princess. Scandal rocks Carlisle, legacy stock plummets amidst heiress's romance. Emma's chest tightened. Her stomach twisted with dread. She knew this was coming, of course she knew, but knowing didn't make it easier. Emma. Vivian's voice was groggy, soft. She stirred, blinking awake, then frowned at the tension etched across Emma's face. They found everything, Emma whispered, turning the phone so Vivian could see. My job, my family, even where I grew up. They're tearing me apart. Vivian sat up quickly, taking the phone from her and tossing it aside. Then stop reading it. Emma gave a hollow laugh. Easy for you to say. You were born into this. You grew up with cameras waiting outside your door. But me? I'm not built for this world, Vivian. I can't. You can? Vivian cut in firmly, her eyes burning with conviction. And you don't have to do it alone. They'll come for me harder than they come for you. Let them. I can take it. Emma shook her head. But I can't stand being the reason you're losing everything. Vivian reached for her hand, gripping it tightly. You're not the reason I'm losing anything. You're the reason I'm finally living. For a moment Emma just stared at her, torn between fear and longing. And though her chest still ached, she let herself lean into Vivian's touch, if only because she needed to believe her. But believing in love and surviving the storm were two very different things. Within weeks, Carlisle Enterprises was in chaos. Board members whispered behind Vivian's back. Her father's temper grew volcanic, slamming fists against marble tables as he demanded she end this childish charade. Investors pulled funding from projects, citing instability at the top. The pressure mounted like a noose tightening around Vivian's neck. Every meeting ended with accusations. Every family dinner turned into war. And through it all, Emma stood by her side, but the weight of it was beginning to crush her too. One evening, after yet another brutal confrontation with the board, Vivian returned home to find Emma pacing the living room, her face pale. What happened? Vivian asked, instantly on edge. Emma hesitated before handing her phone over. They've been calling me at work. Strangers. Reporters. Some of them aren't just asking questions. They're threatening. Vivian scanned the messages quickly, her blood running cold. Anonymous numbers. Vile words. Promises of exposure. Even threats to Emma's safety. Her hand shook as she shoved the phone back into Emma's. You're not going back there. Not to that job, not to that apartment. You're staying here where you're safe. Emma's eyes narrowed. And what then? I become your prisoner in a golden cage? Vivian, I can't just disappear into your world and pretend mine never existed. This isn't about control, Vivian said desperately. It's about keeping you alive. Emma's lips trembled, her voice softer now. I don't want to be another secret you lock away, Vivian. If I stay here, I need to be more than someone you protect. I need to be your partner. Vivian's chest ached at the truth of it. Emma didn't want diamonds or protection. She wanted equality. And Vivian realized, painfully, that she had been treating her like fragile glass instead of the fierce, brave woman she truly was. You're right, Vivian whispered. No more cages. No more secrets. You're not my shadow, Emma. You're the only part of me that feels real. Emma's eyes softened, though worry lingered. Then prove it. Not just to me but to them. The opportunity came sooner than either expected. A week later, Carlyle Enterprises hosted its annual charity gala high-profile event attended by New York's elite, the press, and business leaders from across the country. Vivian's father had insisted she make a flawless public appearance, to assure everyone that the Carlyle name was still strong, still unshaken. But Vivian had a different plan. That evening, when the cameras flashed and the crowd hushed, Vivian took the stage in a shimmering black gown. She began the way her father expected, polished, controlled, a perfect heiress thanking donors for their generosity. Then she paused. Her gaze found Emma in the crowd, standing nervously among the guests in a simple dress that made her glow brighter than any diamond. And for once, Vivian didn't care about consequences. I was told to stand here tonight and present myself as Carlyle, Vivian said, her voice steady. But I can't pretend anymore. Because the truth is, I'm not just Carlyle. I'm Vivian. And Vivian is in love. A ripple of shock surged through the room. Cameras clicked wildly. I fell in love with someone who doesn't fit into the world you all expect of me. Someone who doesn't have a trust fund or a famous last name. But she has something none of you could ever buy. She has honesty. She has courage. She has given me something I never thought I'd find in all of this. A reason to be more than a title. Her voice cracked slightly, but she pressed on. Her name is Emma Hayes. And I will not erase her again. The room erupted, gasps, whispers, outrage, and applause all colliding in a storm. Vivian's father looked ready to explode, his face red with fury. But Vivian only looked at Emma, who stood frozen in disbelief, tears shining in her eyes. Emma's hands trembled as the spotlight shifted to her, but then Slowlish smiled. And for Vivian, that smile was worth every ounce of scandal, every loss, every war still to come. The fallout was immediate. Headlines exploded. Carlyle Enterprises lost investors overnight. Her father threatened to disown her. Reporters hounded them on every street corner. But for every critic, there were others who rallied behind them. Women who whispered, "Thank you for being brave." Young people who cheered, seeing themselves in Emma and Vivian's defiance. A movement quietly sparked a belief that love, even in the most ruthless worlds, deserved a place to exist. Still, the weight of the storm tested them both. One night, Emma sat curled up on the couch, exhaustion heavy in her bones. "Are we strong enough for this?" she whispered. Vivian sat beside her, wrapping her arms around her shoulders. "I don't know," she admitted honestly. "But I know I'd rather fight with you than live a lie without you." Emma closed her eyes, leaning into her. "Then we'll fight." And they did. Together. As winter settled over New York, their love became both a refuge and a battlefield. They stole moments of tenderness in quiet bookstores, found laughter in late-night walks, and built a world of their own inside the chaos. But they also faced betrayal, friends who turned their backs, allies who became enemies. Yet through it all they held on. Because in a city built on illusions, they had found something real. Something worth losing everything for. The storm had raged for months, and Vivian Carlyle thought she had seen it all, headlines dripping with venom, boardroom ambushes, her father's voice like thunder shaking through marble halls. But nothing cut as deeply as the night Emma disappeared. It wasn't dramatic. No slammed doors, no bitter words. Just a quiet note on the kitchen counter, written in Emma's soft, slanted handwriting. "I love you. But I don't know if love is enough when the world won't let us breathe." Vivian had read it until the words blurred with her tears. She had faced Wall Street titans, foreign investors, politicians with knives hidden behind smiles, but she had never faced an empty apartment that smelled faintly of Emma's shampoo, and the kind of silence that felt like grief. For weeks she searched. She went to Emma's old haunts in Brooklyn, scoured diners and bookstores, begged the agency where they first met for any hint of where she'd gone. Nothing. Emma had vanished into the city's veins like a ghost, leaving Vivian to stumble through life as though missing half of herself. The board saw her unraveling and pounced. One gray December afternoon they cornered her. "Step down," they demanded. "Your scandal has cost us millions. Your relationship has destroyed your credibility. If you won't end it, then at least give up the company." Vivian looked around at the men in tailored suits, faces hard with greed. For years she had done what they asked, smiled, obeyed, played her part. But now, staring into their cold eyes, she felt something inside her snap. "No," she said simply. One of them sneered. "You'll regret this." Vivian straightened her shoulders, a fire lighting in her chest. "I already regret every year I wasted being your puppet. If I'm going to fall, I'll fall as myself." And with that she walked out. That night, she stood on her balcony overlooking the glittering chaos of Manhattan. For the first time she was free from the Carlyle legacy, free from the suffocating chains of expectation. But what was freedom without Emma? She whispered into the cold night air, as if the city might carry her words to the girl who owned her heart. "Come back to me, please." It was 2 weeks later on Christmas Eve when fate finally answered. Vivian had agreed reluctantly to attend a small charity event downtown, far from the grandeur of her family's circles. The hall smelled of pine and cinnamon, laughter echoing between modest decorations. She felt out of place in her simple black coat, stripped of the Carlyle name's glitter. And then she saw her, Emma, standing near the tree, helping a little boy tie his shoes, her hair pulled back in a loose braid. No cameras, no headlines, just Emma, gentle, kind, whole. Vivian's breath caught. For a moment she couldn't move, couldn't speak. The world narrowed to the sound of Emma's laugh, soft and real, and the ache in her chest that whispered home. Emma noticed her eventually, her eyes widening, body going rigid. For a heartbeat neither moved. Then Vivian took a step forward. And another. Until she was close enough to whisper, her voice breaking. "You left." Emma's throat worked as she swallowed hard. "I thought it was the only way. You were losing everything because of me." "I wasn't losing," Vivian said fiercely. "I was finding you, finding myself. Don't you get it? The money, the company, it was never mine. It was theirs. But you're the only thing I've ever chosen." Tears welled in Emma's eyes, and for a long, fragile moment, she said nothing. Then quietly, "I was so scared." Vivian reached for her hand, her fingers trembling. "So was I. But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe without you." Emma's breath hitched and the dam finally broke. She stepped forward, collapsing into Vivian's arms, her face buried against her chest. And in that crowded hall, beneath the glow of Christmas lights, the world righted itself again. The months that followed weren't perfect. They faced backlash, whispers, endless scrutiny. But they also faced it together. Vivian refused to return to Carlyle Enterprises, choosing instead to start fresh. She launched a small foundation with Emma by her side, focused on giving opportunities to girls from backgrounds like Emma's, those who had the courage but not the means. Emma flourished, not as Vivian's shadow but as her equal. She brought ideas to the foundation, spoke at events, even stood before crowds that once would have swallowed her whole. And every time she faltered, Vivian was there, steady and unshakable, her hand a lifeline. Slowly the world adjusted. Some still scorned them, but others celebrated them. And while the headlines continued, Vivian learned to stop reading. Because every morning, when she woke to Emma's soft breathing beside her, she realized the only story that mattered was the one they were writing together. On the first anniversary of the night Vivian had hired Emma just to talk, they returned to the little cafe where everything had started. The same corner booth. The same dim light. Emma smiled as she stirred her coffee. "Do you ever think about how ridiculous this was? You paying me just to sit and listen?" Vivian laughed softly, reaching across the table to brush her fingers against Emma's. "It wasn't ridiculous. It was fate. I thought I was buying company, but what I found was everything." Emma's eyes softened and she leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then I'm glad you called." Vivian squeezed her hand, her heart full to bursting. "I'll never stop." And as their lips met across the worn wooden table, the city outside kept moving fast, ruthless, unyielding. But inside that tiny cafe, time stilled. Because two women from worlds that should never have touched had chosen each other. Not for a moment. Not for a headline. For always. The heiress and the girl she once hired. A love that began as a transaction and ended as a forever. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.